community of more than 35,000 professionals dedicated to preparing youth to learn, earn, and thrive in a changing world of work. The network's goal is to improve members' ability to design, develop, fund, and implement evidence-based, innovative, and scalable youth economic opportunities programs that improve outcomes for young people globally. Our year-round activities include the annual Global Youth Economic Opportunities Summit, the youtheconomicopportunities.org Learning Hub, our year-round targeted meetings, and virtual learning events like today's webinar. We want to thank you for joining us for this webinar co-hosted by Ways for Change and Making Sense. We're really excited to have participants from around the world. Last count, we had 160 people registered from about 38 countries. For those of you participating in today's webinar, we welcome your questions and contributions throughout the discussion. If you have questions, please write them in the chat box that's located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please also remember to mute your microphones during the presentation to avoid background noise. Throughout the webinar, we will be gathering your questions, and we will try to address them either during the discussion or following during Q&A. We also welcome your tweeting and Facebook posts on key issues or points you take away from today's discussion using the hashtag #YouthEO. The recording of the webinar will also be posted on our Learning Hub, youtheconomicopportunities.org. Thank you again to Ways for Change for offering to co-host this event with us. We really look forward to your insights on this topic of mental health programming and best practices from sports and development. The full bios of our speakers are available online in the invitation. They have a lot of experience. I'm going to do a shortened version of each speaker's bio today, given the time and the number of speakers, but they all have amazing experience. We do encourage you to learn more about them and Ways for Change. Our moderator today is Bonnie Politz. She's an independent youth and community strategy consultant working on a variety of U.S. and global projects. She has an extensive career focused on ensuring the positive and healthy development of children and youth who grow up in poor and underserved communities in the U.S. and around the globe. Our first speaker is Chris Barkley. Chris has worked in youth development and adolescent health for the past 15 years, designing, managing, and evaluating innovative education programs for young people. Chris now splits his time between Health Warriors, a youth employment startup in Cape Town, and Peaceful Penguin, a nonprofit working on mind, body, and life skills programming for youth. Our second speaker is Tim Conabare, an Ashoka Fellow and founding director of Ways for Change. In 2011, Tim started offering surfing lessons to young people in Masifumalele Township. He formed close friendships with local community members Apish Checha and Bongoni Mbove. Tim, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation during the discussion, who would later become Ways for Change co-founders. Tim supports numerous NGOs through curriculum development, strategy implementation, and executive coaching. He's received numerous awards.
You have been muted. Your microphone has been turned on.
Second? You good? Okay, great. Our third speaker is Jeff DeSellis, Technical Advisor on Research and Curriculum at Grassroots Soccer, a soccer-based adolescent health organization. Jeff has worked for GRS since 2003 and oversees curriculum development, research, and monitoring and evaluation across more than 20 countries. Our fourth speaker is Mel de Villiers. Mel started at Ways for Change as a coach, and through her work on the Gender Sensitization Project, is now a peer youth researcher. In addition to her years of experience mentoring participants in mental health and coping skills, Mel now helps connect the data to the stories on the ground. Our fifth and final speaker is Matt Matilla, Global Director at Ways for Change. Matt helps lead Ways for Change projects, including the Mel Sharing Network, site expansion, and oversees the monitoring and evaluation team. He also helps growing NGOs incorporate mindfulness into existing programs and implements a monitoring plan to capture progress. Again, please check out our speakers' full bios online, and thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. And with that, Bonnie, I will turn it over to you to moderate.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. It's very exciting to be here today. I just wanted to provide a little bit of a context for this really important webinar today. Since the late 1980s, many of us have been helping to build the positive youth development research and evidence base, which focuses on the whole young person, their strengths and needs. We know that all young people around the globe, no matter where they live, need consistent and caring adults in their life. They need quality education. They need safe housing. They need to have opportunities to engage positively in their communities and develop citizenship skills. And they need access to developmentally appropriate health services. What I would say is that over these years, since the 1980s, we have been focusing primarily, though, on the physical health of young people and not the mental health of young people. Over the last 10 years, though, there has been an increased, a really positive increased focus on the issues surrounding mental health issues. Building from the adolescent brain research, which I hope people, if you haven't had the chance to look and Google and find out more about, really provides a great opportunity to ensure that people know we do have a reason to focus on young people. Everything doesn't end at 5 years old or by the 3rd grade. We have lots of opportunities to be making positive impact. So we also know that having a mental illness is not a choice or a moral failing. 1 in 5 young people suffer from mental health, from mental illness and mental health issues. The impact is more than statistics and factoids. It's in feelings and emotions. Having a mental disorder should not be any different than experiencing a physical illness. A mental illness or emotional disturbance makes the things you do in life harder, like work, school, and socializing with other people. There are other facts that are on the actual list that you've got there, but I just wanted to say this webinar is focusing on hope and concrete approaches to addressing mental health needs of young people in ways that make a positive difference in their lives. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris now, and we can just get going. Great. Thank you.
All right, Chris, over to you. Yep,
hey
yeah,
guys,
got
can you hear us? Awesome. It's Tim Coneybear speaking. I'm just going to introduce Paula, Yarrow, and Mel. They're going to take you through the first 4 slides on the concept of surf therapy in the South African context, and then some of the work that we do.
Cool. Hi everyone, so it's Paula speaking here. And you guys can see on the screen at the moment, we've sort of outlined our theory of change on there for you to read whilst we give you a bit of context here. And we can take any questions at the end. But basically, our ways for change, as Bonnie's really well outlined, we kind of know what exposure to trauma and adverse childhood events can do to children. And in a South African context, we actually undertook some PhD research back in 2015. And what we found in that with the children that we work with was that they were exposed to a huge and abnormally high amount of violence and trauma. And that they were being made to take on very adult roles and didn't really have much chance to be children. So we realized that that was influencing children's behavior and also how they learn, and that it was leading to multiple psychological challenges. So at Ways for Change, this was our response to what the research found. We know in South Africa there's really very little, well, no formal structure or system to address mental health challenges in children and young people. And the PhD research that we did was like a participatory process with children we were working with. And they said what they needed to feel better and to feel well was a safe space, consistent caring adults, something fun and engaging, which we use surfing to kind of fill that pillar. And they needed to be taught some skills to cope. So we designed a curriculum to make our surf therapy provision therapeutic, and it actually follows a counselling process, and Mel's going to talk to you a bit more about that later. And what we decided at Ways for Change was that we couldn't remove the children that we were working with from their challenging environment, but we were able to help them to cope. So our response was to develop our surf therapy program. We run it now at scale, and just to give you a sense of scale of who we work with, we've now got 5 sites in South Africa, and we reach about 850 children in each 6-month cycle of our curriculum. We also run a surf club on a Saturday, so once children have completed our surf therapy curriculum, they graduate to a surf club. And our program is run by local youth from the communities that we serve. So all of them are aged 18 to 25. There's 55 coaches that we now employ. And as Bonnie was just outlining, we're supporting those coaches to engage positively within their communities and have a sustainable impact. So they deliver the whole curriculum to children and facilitate our surf club. They're employed on a 2-year learnership and they really become assets to their community. We do also leverage expertise locally, so we bring in debrief psychologists from local communities where we work, and they help our coaches to be in a mentally well space themselves, so they're able to deliver the curriculum. And our surf therapy is a group-based therapeutic approach, and for a lot of the children we work with and for our coaches, that group-based therapy is really what they need to feel better. Those that require further referrals are very well integrated in our communities, and we can refer up to hospitals or other partners where we need to. So I'm just going to hand over to Mel, who's going to talk a little bit more about our counselling process.
Thanks.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Mel and Paula. Can we just ask you to speak a little bit more closely to the mic? We're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Louder.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Mel. Yeah, like Paula said, it's a counseling environment and we follow a curriculum and we also provide the kids with a safe space. And with the safe space, we build a relationship with the children, and with the relationship, we gain trust. And with all of that, we teach them life skills like coping skills, how to calm down, how to handle a difficult situation, and just identifying the strengths also. We have one curriculum training where it's directed to the identify your strengths. So these skills, the kids master these skills and go out after the 2 years or the year in the program and also master these skills in their everyday life. They form a purpose to make positive decisions for their life and implement, like I said, in their everyday life. It's an ongoing process, so 1 year in surf therapy and the following year in our surf club where they gain more skills in surfing, more opportunities, etc.
Cool. Thanks, Mel. Matt, can you flip to the next slide? And it's Tim Conybeare speaking. I'm just going to ask Mel a couple of questions because one of the ways that we got to know the crew at Making Sense is we wanted to know if male and female participants experiencing our surf therapy programs exhibited different forms of symptoms or trauma, or did they experience the surf therapy program in a different way? So this is how we got to know Making Sense, and we started with this process about a year ago, and we did some research in which Mel was very much involved. So Mel, I was just going to ask you a quick question. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the gender project that we did last year? What was your role in the project, and what were some of the things that you found?
Okay, my role was the PYR, peer youth researcher, doing research, and we went for training, and they trained us into the field, the gender project. So the feedback and the research that we did and the feedback that we found is boys and girls do feel different in the program, especially there was feedback from, okay, because of the girls couldn't attend the program, it was certain issues. So the focus groups that we did, we found out similar issues, different groups, but similar issues. Why girl can't attend the program, or why boys more refer to the program because they are labeled as a naughty boy or this, etc. And it also was also the feedback that we got is the boys are more able to go to the back or surf. It's a boys' sport. So the girls were shy, or they had a lack of confidence to actually go out and take this risk and do the surfing. So it was challenging about finding this information about, okay, this is how boys feel and this is how girls feel about the program and about attending the program. So.
And you made one interesting point that this is how boys feel, this is how girls feel. And one of the ways we work is through referral with schools and referral partners. And we noticed that more boys got referred into the program because quite often when they experienced trauma, boys were more outwardly unpredictable in their behavior. What were some of your observations just around how male and female, boy and girl participants exhibit trauma? Like what were some of the findings you had there?
The findings, especially with the boys wrote down, we did a focus group, they won't the one interesting thing I found out, they won't express like the feelings and tell girls or other people how they feel, but deep inside they feel scared, they feel they need someone, but they won't, and then they'll act it out as that strong boy. Okay, I can do this, but deep down they're not feeling like that, because it was a shame. Like, okay, boys never cried. That was all the reasons that we did.
Hi, Mel and Tim. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but you're fading in and out in terms of sound. So sometimes we can hear you really clearly, and other times it sounds like you're farther away from the mic. Can we just ask you to speak up a little bit louder so everybody can hear you?
Yeah, I can just give a quick synopsis of what we just spoke about as well. Was that one of the key findings of the project were that male and female participants demonstrate trauma very differently. The behavior of the male or boy participants was typically a little bit more confrontational, so violence behavior, unpredictable behavior, whereas the female participants internalized a little bit more. A lot of the work that we do in South Africa is through referral. So we actually needed to do some more education with our partners that the signs and symptoms of trauma vary across the different genders, different sexes of participants here. So that had implications for how we set up our sports programs. Obviously, we want them to be equitably accessible between male and female participants. So that was one of the interesting findings that we had. This was just where we got to. But yeah, I think the goal was really to give you an overview of our approach to mental health work. As Mel said, a lot of what we do is around behavior education, so teaching young people behaviors that can help them deal with stress, deal with trauma. As I say, like a lot of, as Mel was explaining, the framework that we use is very much allied to a counseling framework, so it's helping people build relationships with one another so they feel that they can belong somewhere. We then helped young people overcome difficult adverse tasks, so achieve something they didn't think they could do. That obviously builds confidence. And then we teach a lot of very simple kind of mindfulness techniques, meditation techniques that I think Jeff's going to talk to a little bit later in the presentation. But again, it's behavior based. It's giving young people behaviors that they can take home with them that help them deal with a lot of the challenges they're going through. And it's understanding that male and female participants, they exhibit very different behaviors as a result of what they experience. So, you know, in a mental health context and working with different stakeholders in the community, it's just vital that we work with our stakeholders to educate them on the different needs of male and female participants. I think that brings to a close the slides that we initially wanted to share. I think Matt, we're gonna hand over to Matt next. And I think Matt's going to talk about some of our work to align our findings with the global Sport for Change community.
Great, thanks Mel and Tim. And just as a reminder, we'll be able to ask questions of all the presenters at the end and as we go. So we're trying to give you a very quick overview of what each speaker has focused on. So as you can see, Waves for Change, we know these things because we collect a lot of data, whether it's in the traditional survey format, using validated scales, or just asking kids directly in focus groups. We learn where we're strong and where we need to focus more going forward. And so we consider ourselves a new, very learning-focused and small program. And we've worked with a number of much larger, much more established programs to kind of improve and grow as we go. Our issue was, as we started to collect data, we wanted to benchmark it against other programs to see where we can collaborate. And we really struggled to connect with other programs on this. We could have been looking at the exact same topic like resilience or belonging, and other programs either were fairly reluctant to share their data or just they were willing to but used a slightly different scale or a slightly different language or something different entirely. So we worked together with a number of programs, which you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen, to say, hey, can we start to form one set of tools and databases and one source of truth across these programs for things that we have in common? And the way we brought these programs together was something called collective impact that we took from the Stanford Social Innovation, which I highly recommend you use if you're doing something similar. The reason we use that is because we're very much not a leader in this space. We're not the oldest or the biggest or necessarily the smartest program, but we did serve as a backbone organization here. So what we did is we brought all of the programs together on the left, and over the course of 3 years, we worked together to find commonalities across the programs and built a common logic model, and then several tools in the form of surveys and curriculum that any program can use in this sector or beyond. And so Jeff and Chris will talk more directly to those. What I'll speak to is how we built these and what the growing body of evidence looks like. So we gave the network the catchy name Action Impact Network. You'll see that on the far left. And so starting in 2016, what we did is we took a bunch of programs just like Mel and Tim that you heard earlier and put them all in one room. And we said, okay, we know you're all special, unique, wonderful butterflies, but what is it that you have in common? What are the key components that each of you do, and what are the key shared outcomes you're looking for? And it wasn't just the programs. You'll see the next grouping of logos is universities. So we wanted to talk to the experts because while we thought it was great to share internally across programs, we really wanted the sector and the researchers and government to look at our data and say, yes, this is usable, reliable, it's asked and collected in a way that we can use to further the knowledge in this space and give at conferences or talk to people in this sector. We took those tools and the very researchy language and tested them across actual programs. So we know that they work across different places from Norway to South Africa to Somalia and Kenya, all over the globe, in languages, in a variety of ages and contexts. And we did several rounds of refinement of these tools. And the final thing I'll show you, which says 2018 right now, is when we had a final set of tools, we did a group analysis of South African Sport for Development programs. And Jeff will talk a little bit about the outcomes there, but it was really just a trial period to say what can we do and get out of these tools, not just as an individual program, but as a sector as a whole. So this looks very simple. It's our logic model, and that's the idea. What are the simplest, most basic things that you really have to get to these common outcomes? So quickly from left to right, the input indicators. These were things that needed to be on the ground, the key ingredients of your program. This is something that like the UNICEF and the big foundations push us hard on. Like, do you actually know that you have passionate mentors and vulnerable youth? The second one, something that Waves for Change is a bit guilty in glossing over sometimes, is are you measuring what you're doing, not necessarily what's coming out of it? So in the green box, these are our processes. Like, is it somewhere where not just you think it's safe, but do the mentors and participants think it's a safe space? Is the program engaging and exciting? And are you getting the right participants for the right amount of time? Finally, the things that I think everyone's good at or at least excited about, the immediate outcome indicators. So Waves for Change, we were guilty of looking at things that happened very far in the future and that we necessarily couldn't take credit for directly impacting, things that would be impacted by their environment, their schools, their homes. And what we were challenged to do as this group by the researchers and other programs is what are the immediate impacts that you can tie directly to this program? Things like trust and skill progression within that sport, efficacy, and just belonging to the group. Now, what you'll see at the bottom is what I'll dive into next. The 3 surveys basically correlate to each of these boxes and then cover all of the boxes as well in a lesser level. So, for example, on slide 13, what we're looking at are 2 outputs from the org survey and the mentor survey. So these are 30-question surveys where when I say the org, it'll be management, executives, people who do the training. They are forced to rank and answer a series of questions, and then the mentors on the right get a similar set of questions, and they answer things like how useful is the training for improving different aspects of your programming. So what we found this useful for in working internally and with other programs is that it really encourages discussions and conversations, both within your management structure? So does everyone actually agree on the ranking of skills and how important they are and how much time and resources we should put into them? And then is there a connection and correlation across your organization? So do the people delivering the program actually find that they're getting the right training, and is it in line with what the management structure believes? So while this is helpful at one space and time, we've seen several organizations ask similar questions at multiple points so they could see, are we improving or changing the rankings of these? Are we starting to get better alignment across the organization? Jeff will go into the findings for what it looked like as a sector, and that's how we developed trainings and curriculum for going forward to address some of the key gaps. So one other example of what we've collected, and this is something that I think everyone likes to see and you're probably already doing. This is when you ask the participants. So following the flow of the logic model, the org gave the inputs, the mentor said, yes, I feel capable of delivering a safe space and encouraging belonging and helping the kids feel good. Then do the participants actually say, yes, I'm getting the program that you think you're delivering and this is how I feel because of it. So these are two sample outputs. On the left is just a question on, who is encouraging these participants. They need someone supporting them to help prop up their self-esteem and their mental health. And we were really enthused within this group to see that, yep, other than family, these participants feel more supported by their local programs, so their coaches or trainers or whatever you call them, more so than they get encouragement from their friends, their teachers, even social workers. And then on the right side, you'll see a sense of belongingness. So do the participants feel like they belong to the program? Are you helping build an inclusive space? And I would say for this particular group, this is something they need to work on, right? Because less than half of the participants feel like they're an important part of this sports program. Again, all of these I'm sure you're familiar with. There's no right or wrong here. It's just simply here are things we can work on or that we're good at, and we need to start these conversations at all levels of the organization. So the mentor level, the management level, and the participant level. These tools help everyone get a say and be part of building their program. So that's what the tools look like and how we got to them. I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to talk about what the outcomes were, some high-level outcomes from those surveys for the sector we did, and then what curriculum he developed in order to address some of the gaps there.
All right, thanks so much, Matt. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, cool. So I'm Jeff DeSelge from Grassroots Soccer, and it's really nice to see a lot of familiar names in the participant list. So thanks for the great turnout and listening to us today. A lot of you might recognize Grassroots Soccer as an HIV prevention organization, but in the last couple of years we've sort of shifted to address adolescent health more generally, and mental health being a key component. So it's been really great to learn with Waves for Change and as part of the Action Impact Network as we sort of figure out our own strategy. And I'm just going to tell you about some of the findings that came out of that network and sort of the product that we've developed coming out of it. So the first finding, high level, related to training. And the coaches and the groups that participated felt like the facilitators needed to be bought into the approach and have influence. And they really needed to be engaged sort of as co-developing what gets delivered. So the training at a high level, really quality training was key. The second main finding related to the curriculum. So something that people can pick up and use relatively easily to address some of the issues they're seeing. And it was interesting because in some of the programs, the mentors underestimated how many participants experience adverse childhood events, and to the extent that that influenced them. But they also probably underestimated their influence. So when we see across the board, programs are having an impact in increasing access to a trusted adult mentor. These are kind of some of the problems we can address in the curriculum in relation to the ACEs, but then also something we can build upon, that the programs really are establishing that caring adult mentor. And then the third one related to monitoring and evaluation, and the need for standardized, accessible, easy-to-use tools and validated tools. And through those tools, you can show how your program is addressing some of these issues. You can learn and improve, and also how you can show funders that you take M&E seriously, that you're learning, that you're getting better, and as a part of collective impact, you're contributing to a greater field. So those are kind of the three main findings. And Matt, you can skip to the next slide. So with that, we developed a very simple 8-session activity-based curriculum on mindfulness. And again, this is something that can be that we're making available to the Action Impact members and other organizations, and focusing on mindfulness because it is skill-based, it's behavior-based, like Tim was talking about, and it's not really rigorous therapy or anything like that. So we figured there's relatively low risk in scaling something that focuses on mindfulness as opposed to really acute mental health issues. And kind of some of the tenets behind the curriculum is that it's easy to implement. These are sessions that an experienced coach or someone delivering life skills programs can pick up and use relatively easily. It has clear steps. And ideally, it coincides with the training, but it's not extensive. So an experienced youth worker can pick this up and use it. It's modular, so basically this can be integrated as an additional layer into the programs. It doesn't have to be sequential, and we're really interested in seeing how organizations use it in that way. Making it adaptable was key for us. So as someone who writes curriculum all the time, I think we end up writing these really kind of hyper-contextualized curricula that work in a very specific setting. And by doing that, we sometimes lose our ability to compare across communities, across countries. And I think inherent in some of those decisions is the idea that coaches or facilitators need everything scripted. But going to this one, we really approached it as the coaches really do know their participants, what they need. So it can be less structured. And it could be something more generalizable, but included in that are steps to help the coach contextualize herself or himself. It allows for progression, so we've seen, especially in Waves for Change, and also grassroots soccer, that coaches will facilitate the same activity multiple times, and participants like that because they can see their growth. Similar to physical activity, you can do push-ups every morning, and you'll see that after a week you can do more push-ups. And so we want to build that as well into the mindfulness activities. We wanted to, it's designed to integrate into existing platforms. So it can fit, like I said, into existing sport or life skills programs, but also helps identify these teachable moments that are outside the sessions where we think a lot of the real change can happen. And finally, it's built on common rituals and structure. So young people generally really excel when they know what's coming. So it's consistent setup each day, a consistent intro, an activity, and then a discussion and looking forward. So these are some of the ideas behind the curriculum, and we're looking forward to sharing it with everyone. And Chris will talk a little bit about where we're piloting it. We've done some initial pilots in Johannesburg with grassroots soccer coaches, with girls in Kailicha. Chris and I were in Scotland a few weeks ago applying some of these activities, and we'll be working with UNICEF in Somalia in the next couple of months. So thanks, and from here I think I'm handing it to Chris.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Barkley, and I have the privilege of representing RV United, a women's football organization here in South Africa that is using football or soccer, depending on where you're from, to develop life skills among adolescent girls. And let me just do a quick sound check. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. I'll take the silence as yes. Great. So I think, okay, wonderful, wonderful. Great. I think, Jeff, thanks a lot. The last slide was really good at looking at these principles of the approach that the Action Impact Network and Waves for Change and Grassroots Soccer took in developing some tools that they felt were needed. And I guess one of the principles that wasn't there that I think is so important and really wonderful is that it's the tools are open access. So yeah, I'm talking on behalf of RV United because it's one of the organizations that sort of took some of these tools and is now implementing them through their existing work with adolescent girls. And so this is a really quick case study on how we went about doing that with RV United. So it tries to answer the question about how do you effectively share some of these tools with an organization that has existing structures and objectives and is already doing community work with young people, and then a little bit on how they contextualize it for some of their objectives and the audience that they're working for. So this first slide, the heading is Participatory Logic Model. This was the first step, and I know logic model is maybe a heavy term with different meanings for different people, but this was just a way to facilitate a conversation with RV United's players, who are young women and adolescent girls, and their coaches and their administrators about some of the challenges the young people they work with face, some of the activities that they're already doing and would like to do, and what they think those activities contribute to, and really what they would like to see change in the lives of the adolescent girls that they work with. So this was a simple way to start to figure out, okay, what is something that this set of activities can contribute to within the context of the work they're already doing, and what's sort of outside of this program, but we know is an important issue for adolescent girls that they're working with. So that was the first process, just trying to map out and make sure that we understood what the organization really wanted. And you can't really see it here in the cards, but we just sort of settled on this overarching objective of improving the mental well-being and resiliency of adolescent girls, 10 to 16 that they're working with. So if you can go to the next slide. So that was the first part, was just I guess a reality check through this conversation using a logic model framework to make sure that the objectives were aligned to what some of the tools can contribute to. The next was taking all the great conversations we had earlier in this webinar, just about what they learned from the sector and what's out there, what's good practice. So we kind of applied that and posed that to the group of coaches and staff at RV United, and sort of said, okay, here are some of the components and characteristics of effective programming. What do you guys think you do well, and what's sort of missing in your current work with adolescent girls? And so these two areas that are highlighted really came out as areas where they felt they needed support. So what are these effective interpersonal skills that a sort of a caring adult possesses when working with young people? That was one area, and then this idea that they didn't really know how to contribute to helping young people develop coping skills to improve their mental well-being and resiliency. And that aligned really nicely to what Waves for Change and the Action Impact Network and Grassroots Soccer was finding through their work. So yeah, from the needs assessment, the other thing that came out is they were already doing great work. They are doing great work. But they just needed some structure. So they were doing some of their coaches had done training on social and emotional learning, but they had this need for some kind of structured activity to help young people with mental well-being. So if you go to the next slide, I can take you through how we tried to approach this. So yeah, this was really interesting. So we had, I should have listed them here, but we had these 8 practices that came out looking at mindfulness and mental well-being. And because their feeling was that working with adolescent girls, there were some gaps that they wanted to include in the curriculum. So they were really interested, in addition to I guess these mental well-being practices, they wanted a lot of stuff on relationships. So we looked around at some of the organizations doing interesting work with adolescent girls around reproductive health, around healthy relationships, and so also this is wonderful. Grassroots Soccer has open access tools, and so we basically took these 8 practices and added additional practices that had to do with basically relational changes and relationships in their lives. And so we laid this out in a sequence that made sense in a cumulative manner, building towards the objectives that they had set for their work with adolescent girls. Yeah, I think, is there another slide? Maybe go to the next. Okay, yeah, I'll pause there. I guess the last thing I wanted to say, which I think is really important, you know, having it be user-friendly. You know, these are football coaches, and so looking at some of the capabilities that they need to possess to work effectively with young people is really important. And one of the things I really liked about the process was that we sort of drew a line about where they could support adolescent girls in developing mental well-being, and they accessed a social worker who came in and created this really nice relationship with a qualified social worker working in their community, so that they could identify, you know, any adolescent girls that wanted additional support and services and refer them to the social worker, who could then offer, you know, additional support beyond their sort of capabilities and mandate. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Can we unmute? Great.
Oh, hi. Okay, hi, this is Bonnie again. Thanks to everyone. This has been really fascinating and exciting to learn more about. There have been some questions in the chat space, and a couple of them just to remind people that they'll be putting up more information following this around common indicators. People have been asking questions about that, and interestingly enough, some connections, especially between Ephraim from Circus Therapy and what's going on with Waves for Change. So hopefully there'll be some great connections after. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that people brought up in their questions, but and one is about scaling and scale up, and adapting this to other target groups. I know that you said maybe you'd follow up afterwards, but it seems to be of some interest to folks, and you know, growing from dealing with a certain number, and that gets into issues related to policy also, and advocacy at both the national and the local level. So I don't know if anybody is prepared to sort of speak a little bit to that.
Yep, Bonnie, this is Matt. I'll start, and then we can let the rest of the team jump in. Those Action Impact Network tools are built for kind of any size or location of a program, so they're quite generalized. We've had programs with thousands of kids, participants use them, and programs with 15 participants use them, and it seemed to work well on either side. With our experience at Waves for Change, we've gone a number of different ways to grow our program. I think it's important to remember with the mental health world, or at least in the way we approach it, and I know GRS and Chris's program approaches it, is that you need to form some bonds with a mentor. So it probably wouldn't work if you don't have the right ratio and don't spend the appropriate amount of time with the participants, with each other, and with the
Sorry,
mentors.
Matt, you're going in and out. I know we all have we're all connecting from overseas, so we apologize for the weak connection, but if we can just speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the ways that we've grown are create wholly new sites with their own infrastructure, with their own managers and mentors, but then also giving up some of our authority and our control and really helping other programs to ramp up. So using that way to get our methodology and letting people adapt the curriculum, like you saw with Chris's training. So you're reaching many more people and improving their mental well-being, but not necessarily starting your own new program.
Okay. Have you had any, are there any experiences that you've had either locally in South Africa with the community, or, you know, with national, being able to impact any policy outcomes related to what's going on with mental health supports for young people?
Hi, Bonnie, it's just Paula here. Can you guys
Yes.
hear me okay? Hi, so I'm just sitting with Tim. I also work at Waves for Change. And just in terms of policy, one of the things we've done when we've scaled is try and make sure that our ratio doesn't really exceed 1 to 5 in most of our surf therapy sessions for our mainstream referrals. So that's children that go to schools, but government schools and under-resourced communities. So we've been careful with the ratio, but in terms of where we've influenced policy, we've also scaled by trying to reach harder to reach groups of children and children that are even more vulnerable. One of those groups has been children with disabilities. So we've now got just over 100 children in our program who are on the autism spectrum. And one of the ways we've influenced policy there is by working with government at a provincial level here, who've now given permission for children with autism to actually be referred to our program during the learning hours, because they've seen so much value from the process with the groups of children, that they allow us to work with children during school hours and not just as an after-school provision, because they see a very strong connection between a child's mental health and their ability to learn and be happy and to thrive in other areas of their life. So we've now got agreements at a provincial level around our referral networks. It's just one small example.
That's fantastic. That's a great example. Go ahead, yes.
Bonnie, it's Tim speaking as well, just sitting next to Paula. And we have a slightly different project going in South Africa at the moment, but again, engaging with the Safety and Violence Initiative, which is a government agency here. And we've had some really interesting conversations with them around policy change in countries like South Africa. So one of the things you definitely need to change policy is like an enabling government, a government that's able to actually act on policy. One of the big challenges you have in countries like South Africa is that the government is not especially effective. Maybe at top line national government, there are people that want to change policies, but actually getting policies changed and then implementing them can be very tough. So, and I can only really speak for a South African context because we're based here, but I do know that there are similar issues globally. But the concept of mental health isn't top of most governments' agendas. The idea of pushing policy through lots of these governments is also very difficult. So one of the things that we've been trying to do, knowing that sport and connection to a caring adult does have the capacity to prevent mental health issues, is to try and capacitate as many community members as possible to provide these types of service. So that's where the kind of action impact mind power curriculum has come in, is that the more hands that we can get this into, so whether that's through NGOs, sports federations, schools, all of these hundreds of people that work with children or work with vulnerable populations, giving them some really simple tools to structure the way that they teach sports or teach an activity. So the environment itself becomes kind of therapeutic with a soft T. That's kind of the biggest way that we think we can probably scale interventions like this in a developing world context, or maybe not a developing world, but in a context where the government is not necessarily enabling a policy change. So a lot of the work that Jeff was doing and that we were doing with Action Impact is saying, well, if we want to scale this, what are the absolute core elements that have to be in a program to yield these short-term kind of mental health gains, the sense of belonging, sense of self-confidence, sense of connection to more trusted adults. And this idea of structured play, connection to someone that really cares about you, so some very basic coaching techniques. It does seem to have an impact in terms of scaling it. That's what we've designed as a curriculum that anyone can use. You'll shortly be able to download it off a few different websites. There is a training as well, as Chris said. That there's some training that we can offer to organisations that want to go into a bit more depth and maybe change their organisational approach. But we do feel, in terms of scaling this, there are some very simple things that we can put into the hands of community workers. So I think it's one of the big challenges the mental health sector faces, especially in contexts like South Africa.
That's great. I think you're describing, we're all trying to, there seems to be more of a focus over the last year or two about systems change. And I was just in a meeting for a couple of hours yesterday about this. And what you're describing is an avenue into systems change that isn't sort of a typical part of the discussion, which is to be able to sort of feed out what you're doing and making sure it doesn't have to be just about what you're doing in your organization, but what you're learning becomes a part of what's going on in the system, you know, wherever it may exist and wherever that opportunity to reach young people exists.
One final thing that we're also starting to do, and I think it would be brilliant to promote amongst anyone that's going to use the curriculum, we have started to try and collect, we use secondary data a bit in our monitoring framework now. So because we've got quite an interesting and quite a large population now of children and young people that are either coaches or have been coaches with us from the community, or children themselves that have come through the program, we are starting to track other wider outcomes around that child's life. So using CMIS data, it's called in South Africa, that looks at school attendance and school attainment and pathways to the future for children, where it's going to take us longer to do this, but over like a long period of time, we can see whether children that have gone through our program or coaches that we work with have gone on to more positive pathways. So even if we don't have a direct influence on it, at least we can see our children attending school more regularly if they're in our program than if they're not, if that makes sense. And I think that's something over the next 5 to 10 years we'll be able to look at in more depth.
Great. Hi. Thank you so much. That's just really, really helpful. There was a question about equipping the mentors and how you ensure the mentors have the skills and resources they need to provide a safe space and deal with challenging situations with young people.
Bonnie, could you repeat that question one more time?
Sure, sure. How you equip, they want information how you equip the mentors, how you ensure the mentors have the skills and resources they need to provide a safe space and deal with challenging situations with young people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this was sorry, it's Tim speaking again. This was probably the biggest talking point of the Action Impact conferences that we held. Recruitment of the mentors was actually one of the key elements of this. So trying to understand the values of the mentors that you're looking to recruit. It's a lot easier to train or to talk about soft skills than to actually train, if that makes sense. So if you know the types of people and the skills that you're looking for, you can actually recruit the right type of people. So active listening, people who are willing to share time, asking questions about fair access to services between boys and girls. There are some basic questions you can ask when you bring people into your organizations. That saves an enormous amount of training, because if you get someone into the organization with the wrong values, it's very difficult to shift the way that they think about your program. So a lot of the NGOs that came to our conferences, Ways for Change included, focused a lot on training. UNICEF and some of the more institutional partners said, well, if you look at your recruitment processes, then you make sure you get the right people in, and then your training needs are actually less. So understanding the key skills that you want to bring in, and that's the case of just asking a few of the right questions in interview. We introduce things like running a 1-week trial of mentors when they join the organization, so that you're able to see them in the field, see them active. The people they rate with can rate, people they work with can rate them as well. So yeah, in terms of training, we do have some resources again that we can share. One thing Chris mentioned and Jeff mentioned is we do have a 1-week training we can do with organizations that want to go into a bit more depth, but certainly skills around building relationships, listening, sharing is a huge one, being able to share your time. And these are all like very basic behaviors that you can teach. In terms of actually delivering the curriculum, as Jeff said, the curriculum manual itself is very easy laid out. It's something that the mentors can pick up, and essentially what you're looking to do is teach behaviors. So you know, there's a lot within that manual that mentors can use, but I hope I've answered your question kind of directly.
Okay, well, if not, people can also sort of let us know. I know we're going to start to run out of time in a few minutes, but just two quick, one is a follow-up to the mentorship question, and that is something during the Making Sense conference last year in our workshop you mentioned about mentorship as a career pathway for young people. That's one question. And the other is the impact or any intentional work you're doing with families. Young people come and experience this and are getting this unbelievable thing, whether it's about mindfulness or about impacting their own behavior, learning more about themselves. and in relation to others and their own issues. Is there any intentional work going on with families?
Just a couple of things on that. Hi, it's Paula again. So in terms of, we do actually work with very strong referral partners. So we don't always work directly with families, but we work with our mentors because we allow debrief psychologists from the communities to work with us. So we mentioned there's no real formal structure within South Africa, but there are some individuals, and it's more that access to therapeutic or counseling interventions are very expensive. So we do bring in pro bono psychologists who work with our mentors once a week. They do debrief work with them, and they help make sure that our coaches and mentors are themselves in a physically, mentally well, so that they're able to deliver the curriculum. And they can also signpost more challenging issues that either the children bring to the sessions or they themselves have in their own home lives. And so that allows us to prioritize where we refer some of those more difficult, more challenging issues. So either issues at home or in the coach's personal lives or in the children's home lives. We can't always resolve all of those, but we work with our referral partners and try and just find the children that need that kind of intervention the most. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's our current approach.
Okay. That's great. So okay. I think we're close to the end.
We do have about 2 minutes. Are there any closing remarks that the folks at Waves for Change or Grassroots Soccer will want to leave with our audience today?
Yeah, sorry, this is Matt. I would just say one thing. There's a lot of questions about these tools and scaling. They're freely available. We'll send them out with the webinar notes. You will receive your data, but what we'd encourage people to do is if they want to share their outcomes with the larger group or with this network, it'll just help to further build that evidence base and benchmarking, and also help inform policy as well. So just that's something you can consider if you want to get more involved with this.
Terrific. Thank you, Matt. We always appreciate the call to share more data and best practices. We will be putting this webinar on youtheconomicopportunities.org. And if you have any questions or follow-up, please feel free to get in touch with us and to learn more about this webinar and others. I want to thank you.
Sarah, we've got one
more question
go ahead.
This side. Sorry to interrupt. Hi, everyone. Sorry, this is Chris. I was just going to it's so great, Youth Power making sense at putting this, sort of convening. I just wanted to say that the work that's been done around positive youth development and really getting scientific around the skills, I just want to relate this back. I think we're all really interested in bringing that kind of science to this question around what are the qualities, attributes, capabilities of effective mentors, and how does that link? How do those different qualities link to these kind of positive youth outcomes that I think it's been really amazing to see the science behind it evolve. And so I just wanted to put that out there. If there's an opportunity, organizations working on that, really trying to codify, deepen our understanding of the sort of attributes of effective mentorship. I'd love for there to be resources shared after this, if that's possible.
Yes, thank you, absolutely. And I think these are all topics that we'd like to continue to explore through the network, and certainly a lot of material here for a follow-on webinar. We will also be exploring systems change, mental health and trauma, positive youth development, mentorship. These themes will be explored at the Global Youth Economic Opportunities Summit this fall, October 1st through the 4th. So stay tuned for that. We will be publishing our first look agenda on the 25th, and there'll be an opportunity to take a look at how we're looking at some of these questions and topics. I want to thank our speakers again from Waves for Change and Grassroots Soccer for joining us from South Africa today. As we mentioned, this will be online, so again, please revisit the webinar, look for tools, and of course, really appreciate Tim, Matt, Jeff, everyone for being so open about what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how you've adapted your program to respond to some of these challenges for young people. We really appreciate this transparency and willingness to share some of what you're learning. After we close this webinar, there will be a 2-minute survey. We really appreciate your feedback so that we can create more content around webinars for the Youth Economic Opportunities Network. We'd love to hear from you, kind of other topics you'd like to explore, and any other questions you have for our team. Thank you so much again to everyone for joining us from different organizations, and again to Ways for Change and Grassroots Soccer, and of course to our moderator Bonnie for leading us through today's discussion. Thanks everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.